Welcome, David Lesch. Today's edition is about prenuptial contracts.
Prenuptial agreements, prenuptial contract. It's a very relevant issue right now because we're not just talking about prenups or agreements before you get married between a bride and a groom, but it could be between two brides or two grooms now that we have a same-sex marriage in New York. So it's very important that we let everybody know their responsibilities regarding prenups, and if they enter into one, what it means. Let's just talk about what a prenup is. A prenup is a contract between two people before they get married, agreeing how they're going to divide the assets in the event the marriage doesn't last. All right? It can be a little bit of a touchy subject. The best advice I can give immediately, if you're going to have a prenup, make sure you enter into this discussion with your future wife or husband quickly once you at least get engaged, because the longer you wait and the closer you get to the point where you actually walk down the aisle, it's a very stressful time just getting married to begin with. It's not the type of thing you want to be negotiating a week or a couple of days before the actual wedding.
So what's the time frame that you should pretty much have a prenuptial contract signed?
All right, let's say you get engaged and now you plan a date, I don't know, 6 months to a year. The minute you get engaged, you should be letting the other person know we have to start our negotiation process. Because, listen, you may even be discussing this before you get engaged, but you certainly, once you get engaged, you can't put the prenup contract in front of your bride or groom or your spouse-to-be the day before and say, well, I'm not going to get married if you don't sign this, because that could be duress. And the contract, even if it's signed, can end up to be void because you're literally putting the pressure on somebody because you've had the guests that have been invited and you're having a big party. Nobody wants to call off a big party and you're so afraid, so you'll just sign anything. So it may be void to begin with. So my best advice is if you think that you want to enter into this agreement, get it done immediately. And what does that mean? That means the minute you're engaged, you have to get yourself a lawyer and your spouse-to-be has to have a lawyer. It's no good unless both are represented. Now, one spouse can actually pay for the other spouse's attorney. That's okay, so long as each one is individually represented. All right, so that's very, very important. All right, so let's say you're on the same page and you start working out the agreement. Let's talk about what the agreement generally looks like. All right? The first part of the agreement generally deals with the definitions of terms. In other words, what is considered property? Real estate, bonds, stocks, the value of your business. It defines exactly what these things are so each party knows what we're talking about. The second part of the agreement talks about the warranties and representations. It basically means I'm warranting that I have certain property. And the property really does exist, and that there is not more property than what I'm saying. In other words, you're not going to enter into a prenup and not tell the other side that tell your spouse-to-be that you actually have, property overseas or something else that wasn't really included in the prenuptial agreement. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. So that's very important. So that's a warrant. You're warranting certain things. In that paragraph is also called representations. Basically, that paragraph states that you're agreeing that you've been fully represented by counsel, that you've asked questions of counsel, the counsel has answered your questions, and that you're not being forced into this agreement. So you can't come in later on after you're getting divorced and say, I was forced to sign that agreement. My attorney didn't tell me all the things I needed to know. That's the paragraph that basically says, guess what? You were told, you basically signed the agreement, so you're admitted that you were told, and you can't use that as a defense. Then we get into the real juice of the agreement. Okay. That's the property itself. Basically, you're saying, all right, here's the agreement. I have certain real estate. It's going to stay in my name forever. All right? You can't share in my real estate with me no matter what. But whatever the extra value of the real estate is, in other words, during the course of our marriage, if it increases 5% or 10% in value, you can share half of that. All right? So that might be something that would be going to a prenuptial agreement. It's basically saying this is the property, this is my business, the business is going to stay in my name. Those are the types of things that you're talking about. This is what it is, and this is how we're going to split it up in the event.
So what about people who along the way will inherit property? Say I'm getting married and I'm going to inherit a big piece of property or some money, is that considered marital property, or?
That is always considered non-marital property. Whatever you receive in an inheritance from a parent, brother, sister, whoever it is considered non-marital property unless you do something that you should not do, and that's commingle the monies into a joint account. Okay. So let's say you inherit, I don't know, $250,000 from somebody. Whether it's, you sell property that was belonging to a spouse or somebody, and it came into your hands, and then you take that $250,000 and you put it into your husband's joint account with you. Well, then he joins in half of that. But if you keep that inheritance separate into a separate account, that's always yours. So it's very important for you to know that. So inheritance is traditionally non-marital property unless you decide to commingle it. Okay? So that's important. Let's keep moving down the agreement. Now we're talking a little bit about what's called award and alimony. How much are you going to pay the spouse? Man paying a wife, wife paying a man, or man, man, wife, wife, depending on how you look at it. How much are you going to pay, and for how long are you going to pay? You might say that you're going to give a certain amount of money over 10 years, a certain amount of money until that other spouse gets remarried, maybe a lump sum. I will give you $100,000 if we're married for 5 years. I'll give you a lump sum of $200,000 if we're married 15 years. It can all be worked out, but that's the section where it is worked out. We can get a little bit, there's a lot of little dicey in terms of negotiations, in terms of how much you want, for how long, but if you're going to be discussing alimony, that's where it's going to be discussed. And by the way, if you've noticed something that I have not discussed in that paragraph, and that's child support. Child support cannot be negotiated at any time in a prenuptial agreement, because you cannot negotiate how much you expect your child to get. That's for the courts to negotiate. Okay. So if you don't have a child yet, and you can't say, well, if we have a child and a little Johnny is going to be getting, I'm going to give you $200 a week until he's 18. You can't do that. Just like you can't put certain other things in a prenup, religion. You can't say we're agreeing that we're going to bring up little Johnny Catholic, Jewish, however it is. Can't do that either. There are things in a prenup that you can't agree to. Then there are some things that people have tried to put into prenups that have been voided. Things like, you have to maintain a certain weight if you're going to be my spouse, my husband or my wife. We have to have, sexual relations a certain amount of times a month. These are all things that have been attempted in prenups,
that's
which, by the way, will void out the entire prenup. Lastly, I know we don't have much time. In terms of the best advice I can give you with a prenup, other than getting it done quickly, is get a lawyer and make sure that you start the negotiation process really, really quickly, because as you can see, the stuff that I'm bringing up can wreck an engagement very fast. But if you have the assets and you want to get them protected, and 50% of marriages do end up in divorce, I suggest you get a prenup and you get it done quickly so everyone's happy.
Thank you, David. Wow, prenups in 5 minutes.
It's a lot of stuff.
Thank you.